to deal with bikes when they're out on the road. And actually, I will tell you from observing their drivers, they actually took Bert's points to heart. So that's why Muni doesn't cream too many bicyclists. The guys all watch Bert's film. Anyway, Bert, of course, needless to say, a major enthusiast of expanding the bicycle network, which we'll be talking about today. We all know that Bert lives here in San Francisco with his wife, Lorna, up on Mount Davidson. And again, if this does not sound like a good introduction, it kind of got dumped on me at the last minute. So I could have came up with better stuff. I would have made up a lot of stuff, make Bert look like he would have invented the bicycle or something, but I didn't have enough time to do that. So anyway, without further ado, Bert Hill.
Thank you, Pete. This is the first time I've ever done a presentation on Zoom. Can you see the screen?
Yep,
Yes,
I can see
yes,
it.
Bert.
Okay, all right.
No problem.
Good, good. I'm not sure you can see me. I can't see me, but we'll go from there. I was invited by Tony to do this course a couple of days ago, so I kind of threw some things together on the future. But to get to the future, we've got to start with the past. So with that, we'll start out in 1896. And this is Susan B. Anthony, when bicycling became popular about 5 to 10 years earlier. And it immediately got connected with the women's suffrage movement. And these are pretty tough folks, I can tell you that right away. Can you imagine those outfits today, trying to ride a bike in them with that? And you can read what Susan B. Anthony herself said about it. In fact, they were a little bit even more assertive. This is what Anne Strong said in 1895. Bicycling was extremely popular towards the end of the 19th century. San Francisco had per capita more bicyclists than probably anywhere else. New York had more bicyclists, but not per capita. This was the 1896 bicycle march was very interesting. It was 5,000 bicycles and 100,000 people were there for it. It was a major event. And it was actually led by the San Francisco Police Department. And a part of the police department called Scorchers, those were the guys who were the bike cops. The mayor was there, the governor was there, the assemblyman people and the senators. It was a major, major celebration and event. But it was there for a particular reason, really important one. Do you know what do you think would be the reason for that? Well, since you're on mute, I'll say it myself. What they were doing, they were protesting for paved streets. You can imagine that. Paved streets, because in 1896, San Francisco had only cobblestones on Market Street and nothing else. And so they were so successful that out of this, Folsom Street was the first paved street in San Francisco. They also bicyclists also represented at that time a very big different thing, because they were the fastest things on the road, which is why the police used them. They were fastest around. If you saw the old pictures with the horse-drawn carriages and everything else, I don't see any bicycles in this picture. I couldn't find one, but they were everywhere, both for messenger, for work, for riding, everything else. What happened was there was chaos. The street doesn't show it very well, but streets at that time were absolutely packed with horse dung. You know, it was really a sanitary problem. And in fact, there were a number of epidemics and things like that. They occurred from this lack of sanitary conditions and everything. And that's important because we got to the point that something radical had to change. Within about 10 to 12 years, guess what was there? The same street. Totally moved over to cars. Bicycles were generally pushed away and people went on. And the big bicycle people there, like Henry Ford, like the Wright brothers, all went into taking advantage of the new technology. So the love of an automobile really took over, and bicycling was kind of relegated to some recreational, and children and stuff like that. but it wasn't the major force it was up until that time. Then after the war, it went on to a super part. And any of you seen this before? This was the map plan for San Francisco for the freeway system in San Francisco. Absolutely amazing. Those lines are all freeways. So you've got the Glen Park Freeway, you've got the Pacific Freeway, you've got the road to the Golden Gate Bridge Freeway. All of them did a couple of things. One is they bounded around the outer sides. Secondly, they ran right through the middle of mostly African-American neighborhoods because they could get cheaper prices for it. And so this happened all over the nation, that African-Americans, Black people were displaced, and also Asian, Chinese, by these prime freeways when they went in. What happened was a group of, you can read this separately, a group of housewives got together in the 60s and stopped all this. Can you imagine living in San Francisco with a freeway through Glen Park? It's just horrible. So that was the first pushback on the absolute audifying of that. The first, and let's move forward up. The first bike lane arrived at Lake Street in 1971. Doesn't look like it was very popular, but it was that was our first. And through the 70s, a couple of things happened. 1973, City of San Francisco declared San Francisco to be a transit-first city. And they defined transit first as including buses, walking, and bicycles were an integral part of it. And to the point, so that was quite a while ago. That was over 50 years ago, or almost 50 years ago. So they moved on from there. A few more bike lanes were added. And eventually there was a network, bike routes that took bicyclists around hills and things. And then in 1992, how many people remember 1992 and critical mass? Critical mass came up because it wasn't really a protest, it was really a party. And sometimes motorists especially got upset with it. But it was a party that actually people came into San Francisco to witness. They'd go to the restaurants and watch the group go by. Critical mass, San Francisco was first, and eventually wound up in 40 different countries, but only in countries that didn't have essentially a bicycling framework. Because so it wasn't in the Netherlands, wasn't in Denmark, wasn't in all the kind of cities that had a strong bicycling system. Critical mass, as bicycling has become more and more common, has gradually moved away. Next step was the bicycle plan. 2005, San Francisco published an integrated bicycle plan. And what happened in the freeway period back there, which you saw in the earlier map, the standard that traffic engineers used for designing roadways was LOS, which is level of service. And that came up in the late 50s. It was 1958, I believe, and I think it was from Los Angeles. And what happened was, because there was so much pollution, you remember Los Angeles in the 1960s, how absolutely horrible it was? Well, LOS was a design that said level of service was that the design of engineers on roads was to never allow too much vehicles to wait very much time. So if a roadway was too congested, you added more lanes, you added more freeways, you added everything else to do it. And in their evaluation, that bicycles got in the way of LOS because it took up space on the road. And so there were problems with it. So when we published the bicycle plan, that's my committee, Bicycle Advisory Committee was sort of the monitor and carrier. We had the public hearings and things like that. So somebody filed suit to say that bicycles were causing pollution through congestion. And there was a San Francisco judge who supported that, and he locked down the bicycle plan so tight that you couldn't even put a bike rack on a sidewalk. And it took 4 years and millions and millions of dollars spent to actually convince the courts that bicycles were not an environmental problem. That was how warped the thinking was at that time. So it moved over to something called vehicle miles traveled, which is a much more measure of movement. But what we're doing now, we've evolved further, and we're now going for PMT, which is persons miles traveled. So before, a bus was the same as a single occupant vehicle. A bicycle was not often counted as a vehicle in it. But when we're moving people, it encourages an aspect of how many people are we moving, because we shouldn't be moving just cars, we should be moving people. And that's pretty much the new standard. That's why you see special lanes for buses these days and that sort of thing. So it's a major change philosophically in design, roadway design. Forward up to 1996, a bunch of cities like San Francisco, Chicago, put together a National Association of City Transit Officials, because the National Highway System and all of their rules and everything, it took about a decade to do anything. So they designed a whole new set of things for this group of cities. And in 2009, came out with the Urban Bikeway Design Guide. This is what you see when you see all the new kind of bicycle facilities and things like that. You see the green wave thing and special signals and equal treatment, more or less equal treatment for bicyclists. Now, at the same time, what's happened is we've evolved a little bit, and more people are not just using bicycles, but they're using scooters and all sorts of other things, as well as checking out bicycles. In 2014, the city was concerned because we were losing 30 to 40 people in traffic-related deaths in San Francisco. Just unacceptable. Too many cars, too many motorists driving too fast, not paying attention, having problems with that. Out of that 35 to 40, the average number of bicycles over a 20-year period who were fatalities was about 2. Very, very low. And in the last couple of years, it's moved down to 1. And I'll tell you, the one cause, and it was consistent over the last 2 years, is called dooring. It's where a motorist opens their door right as the bicycle is riding by. And the handlebar catches it and throws them pretty violently right in the middle of traffic, and it's almost always fatal. So our last 2 fatalities have been from dooring, which leads to the need for better design of bike lanes, obviously. But I think it's probably in the 10 Commandments of the Bill of Rights that you never remove parking. And so we're attacking that pretty thoroughly to try to get parking removed when it's unsafe for bicyclists in some streets. So Vision Zero was something that was started by the city of San Francisco. It's now moved into a number of other cities, and it's actually a national program now. It's dedicated to saving lives, prevention things, develop prevention, a recognition of equity, that not everybody has the same ability to travel, and that we need to have a way of traveling cheaply and easily for everyone in our country. Safe streets, inherently safe streets by design. One example I would say is it used to be, how many of you remember in this, up until the 1980s, cars had to stay 6 to 8 feet away from the curb. That area before it was no parking, and the idea of that was it gave motorists an opportunity to see pedestrians who were coming off the sidewalk. That was eliminated by the motor lobby because they said it took up parking spaces. And so they took that down, and immediately we started getting more and more people killed and injured in intersections because they tended to be blind, and often big trucks were parked there. So that's the kind of thing that Vision Zero is working to change. And then lastly, safe people and safe vehicles, planning levels of safety and regulations. And this is probably too detailed. I mean, let me see how my time is. It's probably too detailed to go through, but essentially it's a mode shift, sustainable travel changes, transit first, climate action, because we do have a climate emergency, and land use housing are also part of Vision Zero in their designs. It includes, this is a political end, automated law enforcement. Get away from the idea of having cops pulling over people. One reason is because cops have a bad reputation of following around and pulling over Black people. and turning automated enforcement into something that's more objective. So automated enforcement, pricing and reducing vehicle miles traveled financially, making it more expensive. Urban speed limit setting, 20 miles an hour or less. A person who's hit at 20 miles an hour or less has a pretty good chance of living. Above that, increasingly they have a pretty good chance of dying. So just slowing down the speeds, particularly in residential neighborhoods and school zones and things like that. And then local regulation of transportation network companies, which is rideshare. Move forward to today. This was already starting before the pandemic, but the declaration of emergency became a great opportunity for closing down sets of streets, except for local traffic. And we've got quite a network that have been, so there's space for people don't have to walk on sidewalks. There's space for socially distancing walking, no changes to parking, emergency access deliveries. The idea is if you live on the block, you can use it. If you don't live on the block, go to one of the other streets. It's not a safe street. It's been very successful. Here's a map, even though it started relatively recently, and I know not focused very well, best I could find. But this is the slow streets network building up in San Francisco. The next program that started is what Quick Build. Normally to build a change in the roadway, it takes a matter of years, sometimes three to 5 years. This is unique because what it does is it looks at traffic safety and things that are easy to implement. In other words, paint. You just change paint and you may change a couple of things on signals and you can go ahead and put it in. So these are all the ones that have been built now or designed, that was designed by them, but they've been installed at this point. You can recognize the streets. The last one was just this last month, and that's putting a bike lane on Fell Street. So you now have a separated bike lane on Fell Street, so the bicyclists aren't competing with people who want to saunter on the panhandle walking. It makes it much safer for people who are actually trying to get somewhere. So this is the kind of project. And my committee has filed for the same thing to be done with Portola, putting a protected street on Portola. So from bicycles to active transportation, I alluded to this earlier. So it's no longer bicycling. It's any self-propelled, human-powered mode of transportation, such as walking, bicycling, scootering, skateboarding, and dozens of other efficient, emission-free conveyances. We see this as growing and continuing to grow in the future. Physical inactivity is a major contributor of the steady rise in rates of obesity, diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and other chronic health conditions in the United States. So this is a way of being able to get where you want to go in a city that's 7 miles by 7 miles without having to get into a car and pollute the atmosphere. And streets are the perfect location for socializing, exercising, learning new skills, breathing, and especially beauty and life. And in that regard, I've got two more slides. Livable City produces for the Department of Public Health and the MTA Sunday streets. And if you haven't been to a Sunday street, you should go to it. It's a wonderful thing. And where we block off maybe more or less a mile. This is Valencia Street, I believe. And it is just filled with people having a good time. It's just for the day. And there's all sorts of merchants. And the city has, city departments all have booths where they talk to the people, the public. It's very exciting. It's 10 years old now. And we had to suspend that this year. I'm on the board of directors of Livable City. And we had to suspend it this year with the coronavirus. We also do play streets that empowers communities to cross San Francisco to transform their block for periods of time. So kids can come out and play and have a good time, and adults can come and talk to each other. And some of that is certainly true of slow streets too. You see more people coming out. And then lastly, the last one is Neighbor Fest, where the city, if a neighborhood applies for it, will pay the costs of the permits, blockades, rules, everything else, so that you can have a block party. And they have a chance, again, with booths in tight neighborhood, to talk about emergency readiness, clean power, and other departments. And I'll just finish with, as you walk and leave your door, consider which of your transportation options best support sustainability, your health, budget, peace of mind, and future generations. And you may choose another mode of transportation than just getting into your car. And with that, I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Bert. Let's go ahead and open it up. A fantastic presentation, by the way. Thank you I learned a lot.
Yeah, well, as you know,
So
I
many
didn't
good things.
have much time to put it together, but thank you. So let me,
Let's go ahead and, go ahead, Bert. I interrupted you.
you go ahead. Does
No, I
anyone-
was just going to suggest, because we got a number of people on the call today. Why don't, if you have a question, why don't you go ahead and use the hand raising function on the bottom, and that'll help things out a little bit. And I know Antonio had a question. Antonio?
I just want to say thanks, Bert, for the great last minute save, incredible presentation. The history and the origins of the bicycle establishment in San Francisco was particularly interesting with that. And I didn't know that bicyclists were responsible for paved roads in San Francisco. So that's super cool. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Antonio. Betty Taish?
Bert, thank you. That was a wonderful, wonderful presentation. At first I thought, do I really want to hear about bicycles? And it was fabulous. I learned a lot, especially I've already posted a picture about the 1896 light and have 2 comments on it on Facebook. But I had an experience, when I was living in Noe Valley years ago, and I would open my car door and a bicyclist flew by coming down Jersey Street. And boy, did I learn then. He didn't hit the door, but after that, I mean, he could have been killed. And because I didn't see, I never even thought 20 years ago to watch for a bicyclist. And so I really learned that lesson, and the statistics are really impressive. So I applaud everything you have been doing and opening doors. I always now look to make sure that nobody is flying by. So thank you, Bert. Great presentation.
For what it's worth, the California Vehicle Code states that that's the driver's fault,
Yeah.
motorist's fault. So it's a very clear identification of who's. In Europe, they have a rule that you have to open your door with your right hand. So and at least that recognizes that you think about it.
That's a great idea. But if we can't get people to wear masks, that's not going to work. But
And they don't do that in Great Britain, I'm sure.
great idea.
Right?
Bert, I have a question.
Well, Patricia's been doing it for a while. I think let's get her first.
Yeah, thank you, Bert. Yeah, I wonder if you could tell us any more about what women went through, because that was such an important part of their liberation. And I love the quote about you can replace your old battered bicycle, but perhaps not your husband. Are there any more stories you have around that?
You know, actually, I do have some stories. I don't want to take a lot of time now, but that might even be something to talk about, is the women's suffrage movement, because it has so many dimensions. These were very spirited women who took a lot of chances. They had to deal with things domestically because their husbands didn't like what they did. And it's actually kind of a sad story. But the most important thing to remember is at that period of time, women were often more cloistered than women in parts of the Middle East. And they had to always be accompanied, and they had to fit gender-based rules, and they had to be driven around on horse-drawn carriages and things like that. They didn't do it alone. There weren't really any Annie Oakleys around, and the bicycle was their opportunity, the first opportunity of freedom.
Fabulous. Right. Didn't know that.
Bert, I have a question.
Yeah.
When you showed the picture of Valencia and you said that a mile of it's closed and all those people were walking down it looking like they're having fun. So in that mile, there's 10 or 12 cross streets. Are those cross streets, are they blocked as well, meaning the cars can't go across the street that's closed?
Yeah, the answer is yes and no. Some streets, like a major arterial, we'll say maybe 24th, hypothetically, what they will do, they have people who stop the people from crossing. And then the police are there too, and let cars go through. Okay, and then they close it off again when the light turns green. So it's with the signal sequence, they escort them through. But that's only one street in maybe 4 blocks or something like that. So so if you go down one of the arterials, you can do it. But if, let's say, hypothetically, you were on 23rd Street in Valencia, that would block that off there. They'd have to go over to 24th to go through.
So in essence, the major streets, they have something, I can understand that, but on the minor streets, that means the streets that go 1 block to the right and 1 block to the left, they're also closed.
Well, they're not closed to be on that side block necessarily, but yeah, they would have to go down another.
Vehicle traffic I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
But it's usually only for about 6 hours. I mean, it's not, and it's on Sunday. So it doesn't, no one's really complained very much about that aspect of it.
Hey, Bert, I have a question.
Yeah.
Many years ago, as you probably know, and everyone that has lived around here for a while knows, in Berkeley, they decided to do this annoying thing. They put these huge flower pots in the middle of the street to stop people from going through, and they would have to take a right-hand turn, which would slow them down so no one can go essentially cross town in certain streets. Has there been any thought or any discussion in San Francisco of doing that anywhere?
We've experimented with it a little bit. It hasn't been very popular.
No, it's not.
But on the other hand, you know, we talk about stop signs, we talk about bicyclists running stop signs, but if you look at it carefully, most motorists also run stop signs too. You know, and so the traffic circle can have an advantage in that you don't have to stop, you know, because you can go right and you don't have to worry about left or anything like that. Or actually, you can go right turn because the left is the only way you have to look. So there are advantages and disadvantages of it. One nice thing about it is anytime you stop a car and start it, you're putting wear and tear on a car. And a lot of that pollution from brakes and everything else, you know, getting into the local environment, it's better to have a car just moving. So it's safer and takes up less time.
Say, Bert, I thought I'd just mention, since I've been using my my new e-bike, I came across a bike app that is extremely useful because it's a GPS system that gives you turn-by-turn directions to find the safest way to get to any destination. And I would sure recommend that for anybody that's just getting back into biking like myself.
No, it's right. Well, Google Maps does that. So it's very, you know, so it's very, very easy to get and very, very helpful. In fact, it's so ubiquitous. Just about everybody uses it, except I don't like using it because I don't like anything that would distract my attention from riding. So,
Right.
That's the one caution I would give. And you can never put earphones on your ears and when you're in traffic, whether you have a car or a bicycle. It's not safe.
Well, you can put one in.
Pardon me?
You can put one headphone in.
Yeah, it's still distracting. Patricia, you had another question?
Well, I had the privilege of helping Greg LeMond, 3-time Tour de France winner, with a presentation. And he said when he was 14, he was taking skiing lessons, and the instructor said, if you cycle, it'll build up your leg muscles. And he was saying once he got on a bike, then skiing was forgotten. And I said, would it be true to say that when you're cycling, it's almost like a spiritual experience? And he said, how did you know? And I would ask you, when you first started cycling, was that your experience?
I think it works better for Greg LeMond because he was out on the country and riding and outside.
Yeah.
My bicycling, I don't even own a road bike. I do what's called urban bicycling, you know, or utility bicycling. And so there are times that I can find that there are times I do. When I went down to the California coast, that was where I did that. But most of the time I'm concentrating on what motorists are doing. So it's not quite the easy thing that it is in urban riding, but it is still by far the best way to travel. It is excellent. Anybody else?
Yeah, getting back to Patricia, I rode my bike to San Diego in 5 days, and it was about 10 hours a day. And I really got into a Zen mode where I don't even remember part of the trip, but I was just kind of spaced out, and it was quite relaxing actually. So I can understand Patricia's thought on that, because I was in that zone for long distances.
Yeah.
Like,
We have a question from Mike Gaylord.
Yeah, hi. Great presentation, good information. A question and maybe kind of a comment, but is critical mass still a thing, or did that sort of drain away?
I think it's kind of drained away. I don't see anything of it anymore. I don't work downtown anymore, so I used to go, used to get it started out at the Lane Court Fountain, and I was only about a block away from it, so I knew what happened every week. But I haven't heard anybody in my group talk about it very much. There is another group that meets on the first Friday of the month, and it's called Bike Party, and they ride around the city somewhat the same way, except that they follow traffic signals and things like that, and they'll pull off to go to the plaza or something like that, and then they have a boom box and people start dancing, and pretty soon people from the neighborhood all come out, and you've got a big dancing thing going on, music and all that sort of stuff. But that's on the first Friday of the month. So, but I think that's kind of replaced it. But it's all very polite.
It was a delight, and for the previous comment, it was kind of a spiritual experience as well, because it was like being in a school of fish or a flock of birds, and say going through the Broadway tunnel, and all you can hear is the click of the derailleurs. It was just, the times I went on, it was just an experience, and I'm sorry it's gone.
It is an excellent way to relax as versus driving a car.
Yeah.
All right, we have a question from Patricia, and then it's 8:35 right now. So go ahead and answer Patricia's question, then we'll end the video, and then we'll keep the doors open until 9. So if you have more questions, and I have a couple of questions for you too, Bert, then we'll go ahead and end the meeting then. So Patricia?
Well, I just wanted to acknowledge to our president not to forget, while we still have an audience, to promote our speaker for next week, who is Derek Arden, a friend of mine who is a negotiation expert in England. And he is zooming in to talk to us. And this presentation, I think he's presented, I know I wrote up the bio yesterday. It was 23 or 32 countries. Can you remember? Anyway, but he's a great guy, written 4 books to do with negotiations, and he has a great personality. And he zoomed in to meet us when Tim Durkin was speaking. So I hope you will share that with your friends.
Definitely, and actually, thank you for bringing that up, because I'm looking forward to his presentation. Because negotiating, we all negotiate. We think of it as a business thing, but that's not true. It's like every one of us negotiates with everybody, so it's going to be some really good information. So that's going to be awesome. In fact, we have an incredible set of speakers for the next. We're booked really pretty much up until October at this point. We have Dr. Kim joining us on August 26th. He's going to be talking about helping children smile. He's a reference and a friend of Tom Kowalski's. And then following that on the September 2nd, we have Barbara Berrigan-Perea, and she's going to be talking about saving the Delta. And she's been brought to us because of Joel Panzer. So thank you, Joel. So why don't we, let's go ahead and thank Bert right now for his presentation. That was awesome. So Bert, why don't you stick around? We're going to have some more questions, and I'm going to figure out how to stop the recording. And thanks again, everyone, for joining us this week at the Golden Gate Breakfast Club.